Cool. So I thought tonight we'd discuss what's going on with Justin Timberlake. He was arrested a day or two ago for drunk driving. And so that's actually really good. It's a good thing to look at astrologically because we have a date and a time that it happened, and we have his birth chart. And so potentially that can give us insight. Before this happened, I kind of wanted to do the serial killer that they caught out on Long Island this week. They didn't catch him this week, but I wanted to do his chart this week. But there isn't really a public chart for him yet. And what was my point in mentioning that? There is for Justin Timberlake anyway. So yes, just getting started. So one of the things that we want to look at with something like this is we already know what happened. So we want to look in and try to get deeper insight into what happened for him. And so you can pretend doing this kind of reading that he would be your client. Like, this is somebody that we're curious about and are investigating more deeply due to astrology. So when I hear drunk driving, I think of one planet. Do you know the planet, Mary Ellen?
Um, well, I, I don't know. I mean, Mars came in my head, but I don't think it's Mars.
Mars is the second
Oh,
one I would mention.
was it like Neptune or something?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because Neptune is altering consciousness. It's constantly, that's what Neptune's always doing. And so when people have something going on like a DUI arrest, Neptune should be in play. Because it rules anything that has to do with altering your consciousness or anything visionary, anything that's outside of our regular states of consciousness. So, but you're right that Mars is the other one that I would look at uh, in an event like this, because it's the lesser malefic, but Saturn really kind of Saturn's the greater malefic, but it sits there and kind of grinds away at one place, you know? And Mars is the malefic that's real. It moves faster, and it's really associated with sudden events, particularly a square from Mars. Uh, that's sort of its signature move. And a square would be really anything that's two signs apart. So looking at Justin Timberlake's birth chart, just this gives us more of a view into him as a person. And so we would start with the rising sign. And so we notice right away he's a Leo rising. And that means he's ruled by the sun. So he's sort of here to become something. What would you say about his sun placement, Mary Ellen? Or do you have any thoughts about his sun placement? It's over here.
Um, well, it's not good, right? Because I think the sun prefers to be in Leo, and
Yes.
it's really far away from Leo.
Yeah,
Um,
it's across the way.
but you were saying, like, in one of your writings, your daily things about Mars, like a weak Mars is better than nothing. I get right. Is that what you were saying? So a weaker sun is better than um
Oh
like
no, that
no.
it was the opposite. Stronger is better than weak.
Oh, okay.
Even with Mars, even with a planet that's malefic, stronger is always better than weak.
Okay.
And so you're seeing he has a because he has his sun in Aquarius, he has a weak sun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean that would go for anybody uh born with the sun in Aquarius. I'm
Right.
one of them. We all have a weak sun. And you have to be a Leo, so you have the stronger sun on the other side of the chart. well, what else would you say about the placement of this sun and what it would say about him, what he's all about?
Let's see. Well, then I would look at the seventh house. But do you not focus on houses that much?
Oh yeah, totally.
I mean, with this question, you mean with the sun?
Oh no, I'm definitely referring to the house, the sign, anything
So
you see
that
around the sun.
yeah, so the relationship, that's the seventh house, and one to one, like a best friend, marriage. Um, well, I mean, I don't know what he goes through in his marriage, but just from what it's like the press says, it's like she has to put up with a lot, like his, infidelities and now this,
Oh, I
um,
didn't know he had the infidelity.
um I mean, I'm sure he's had more than just what it was said, which was a few years ago. But um, so the sun in the seventh house, you would think it would be like kind of a good thing, but then there's Mars there, and then there's the upside down like rainbow, which is like karmic, right?
Yeah, old
I mean,
karma.
see, my theory is that everyone in the Mickey Mouse Club, and he was in it, was molested. So, I don't, I'm sure this is all because a lot of stuff is coming out about these pedophiles in Hollywood. So I don't know if he's having more trouble and so he's just trying to drink away his problems, but um, so there's lots of, I think Mars is like trying to separate in the seventh house, your relationships.
Yeah.
But I don't know the dynamic between the sun and Mars, though.
No, that's a good question because they're in the same sign for him, but they're not really what you would call conjunct. So I
Right.
would say they're affecting each other. They're affecting the atmosphere of that sign, so to speak. Like a sign really comes to life when the sun is in it. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's the bright light that's going to light up everything in the room, so to speak. And so it's it's the sun is sort of a benefic. It's sometimes it can have bad indications, I guess. But it's basically, the greatest benefic of all. It lights things up. And so that's good for this Mars and makes a better environment than it would otherwise be. But then with astrology, it all depends on your point of view, because if you're looking at uh what is that Mars trying to do, then that's a whole other story.
Right.
'Cause wherever Mars is, because Mars is the lesser malefic, it's going to be the second worst place in the chart. And
Right. Yeah, like I was thinking like the sun will shine on your relationships in this maybe in this house, but then with the Mars there, it's like there's also this, I'm not sure if it's him or people around him that they just want to separate. Like it's hard to, does that always mean that he's affected or is it the people around him? Or is it both?
this chart, or anybody's chart, we're kind of looking at the world through his eyes with this chart. And so he would, having Mars in the seventh house, and this would go for anybody who has Mars in the seventh house, generally speaking, it, that's where you experience separation, wherever Mars is, and so he's someone that would perceive relationships that he's in being kind of torn apart.
Yeah.
And so, if you look at like an astrology cookbook and they tell you having Mars in the seventh house, an old-fashioned astrologer might tell you, oh, that means you're going to have a divorce, because
Yeah.
it
Right.
indicates separation. It also indicates motivation and what's really important to someone.
Right.
And so it has that flip side of someone wanting to distinguish themselves wherever Mars is too. And so
Right.
that's the more positive aspect of it. But yeah, I think just looking at his birth chart to kind of get a snapshot of who he is, the first thing that this chart tells us is that relationships are hugely important to him.
Mm-hmm.
because his chart ruler, which is also the sun, is in the seventh house. And so it's really whatever he's here to become, because the sun is becoming, it has to it has to uh be in the context of a relationship. It's I know he had an album a couple of years ago that I saw something kind of making fun of it, called like Man of the Woods. And you got the idea that this is a time when he's sort of going off by himself.
Right.
But we know from the chart that's never where he'd stay. That wouldn't be the real him, because he's motivated to be in relationships, and relationships are everything that is him, so to speak.
Right. So this always like makes me go to this psychological perspective too. Is so does he try to do anything to save his marriage or relationships, and yet he has this alter ego where his actions are separating himself from his partner,
Yeah,
right?
does he create his own separation?
Yeah,
Definitely.
right. So like
Definitely.
whether it's drunk driving or whether he's touching a co-star's leg, which is what they said, and they were both coming out of their trailer like 4 years ago. um both of those kind of can put distance with him and his wife.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And oh good. Um they you can see that relationships are so important to him, but there's multiple indications of struggle in this too. If
Right.
this were sun in the seventh house and the sun is in Leo or Aries, then we'd be in better footing. But it's in a house, the sun is in a sign where it's in its detriment, and Mars is co-present in the same sign. And there's also the south node here. And
Right.
that is always, like you said earlier, it's the one that looks like an upside down rainbow, and it has to do with old karma. And so there's something, this would be someone with this kind of placement would be drawn to relationships that have an old karma aspect to them. And so old patterns would be alive in the relationship from the first, in whatever relationship he's in, because who he is has so much to do with past and past karma. And so he may be in his life, he may be, say, repeating stuff that his dad did, or repeating I
Oh,
don't know anything about his family, but because of the old karma, he's
right.
repeating patterns. And it could be stuff he's done in a past life, kind of thing. But you can also, with the South Node, it can be kind of a stuck place. And so he's someone that would be repeating old karmic patterns around relationships. And the way that we read charts, we start, and we've done it this way with his chart, we start with the most important thing. And so we know we're getting, this is a snapshot of him. And this is the first and most important thing it's telling us, which I think is really interesting. I also think the Mars in the seventh house representing a divorce, in more like old fashioned, more deterministic astrology. I think you could say that was played out in his life, though, because I don't think he was ever married to Britney Spears, but he's very famous for being in a relationship with her and then not. That was a significant relationship
Right.
whether they were married or not, people still associate them together. And it didn't work out. And so you can see how the Mars is accurate there too.
Right. And and don't ask me why I know all this information, but my neighbor was reading her book, and she said, he went, supposedly he wanted me to have an abortion. And I think that's when the relationship started falling apart. So again, like if that's true, his decision to push for an abortion, you know, they separated.
Yeah. And an abortion, I would say, would also be would also be ruled by Mars,
Yeah.
because it's separating, it's cutting. And so that's another way that this would be represented by his chart. It's
Right.
interesting too that this Mars is in direct opposition to his ascendant.
Yes. Right.
And so there may be something, your ascendant is like your own viewpoint. And so he would really see this Mars in other people. He might see other people as doing the separating.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a real conflict there between self and other. And it's because the sun is there, because it's the ruler of the chart, it's also significant. So looking at his chart, what we're really looking for in his case, because we're talking about one incident, and what would it look like? What does it look like astrologically, and what can that tell us? So the next thing that I would look at in this chart, normally I would say, we've looked at the sun, now let's see what the moon is doing. I wouldn't be thinking about that yet, because we're kind of going in and trying to feel around, like, is this a long-standing issue for him? If we were doing astrology to the stars, the next planet I would look at would be Neptune. And
Yeah.
what is the substance use thing like for him? And actually, the I usually don't look very deeply into these charts before we talk about them on here, and so I'm kind of gobsmacked actually by what I'm seeing. Do you see it?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's practically on top of his feelings. So does that mean his feelings are delusional, or his delusions cause trouble, like mental, maybe mentally? I don't know. So the fifth house is creative, fun, pleasurable, romance, joy, childlike, and self-expression. So what does that mean? That his idea of fun is getting high, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. And that's exactly how I'd put it. Because you've got the fun from the fifth house and the altering consciousness from Neptune, and that exact conjunction with the moon is this is where all of his emotions are centered. And being in the sign of Sagittarius too, which is known for being the explorer, is Sagittarius, the traveler, the person that wants to seek out new horizons. They're always kind of looking for the next thing. So uh, there's a there's a real probably boundary pushing aspect of this for him too, that it's not just altering consciousness, it may need to be a little bit wild as well. And I now think that his relationship with alcohol or other substances potentially is is a hugely central issue in his life, after first, women, and second, this.
Wow.
That's so interesting. So I
Yeah.
thought it would be interesting too to look at his transits and his progressions for this, and a chart for when it happened.
Yeah.
So I started with his progressions kind of arbitrarily. This is the one where uh, they take your birthday, and then for every year that you're alive, they move your chart forward a day. So I'm
Right.
47, and I was born January 28th, so you'd add 47 days to that, and that would be my progress chart for right now. So the progressions are really helpful in terms of, like, that drills deeper down into your life story, your life theme, and the really important stuff behind the scenes that's happening for you right now. That kind of thing. Transits, and we'll look at his transits too, are more, they're less inner, they're more about things that are happening to you from the outside world. if that makes sense. The progressions are more about soul evolution. Okay. So looking at his progress chart for this year, is there anything that jumps out to you?
Well, I'm like the sun and the Mars are practically on top of each other, and the Venus is there too. So, and the eighth house is like your insecurities.
Yeah.
So I think he's really struggling with who he is, his relationships with people, and the Venus is like, is he starting to feel insecure about his attractiveness, or like not just his appearance, but like attracting maybe fame or attracting people to him, or is he doing that too much and it's causing him trouble? I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely what you're saying about insecurity and this Mars Sun conjunction that is going to be, since we're looking at the progress chart, this is years long for him. And so this isn't even the peak point of that conjunction. It's kind of hard to read, but it looks like the sun is at his progressed sun is at 25 degrees of Pisces, and the progressed Mars is at 29 degrees. And so next year in his progress chart, the sun will be at 26 degrees of Pisces. And then a year after that, 27. So this is still not exact. This is a very long term, very powerful influence because we know the sun is his ruler.
Yeah. Or I wonder if his like he feels like, well, I mean, obviously with the DUI and that being on the news, he's attracting negative attention, which is separating him from others and maybe who he's supposed to be. I don't know.
Yeah. He's definitely having a Mars experience for the next
Yeah.
maybe even really 10 years before this influence is over. And it's right in that mental health part of the chart.
Yeah.
And so having Mars happen to you in such a like a blatant way as this, like this is something that's going to be happening for a long time, and it's Mars and it's his ruler. uh, I think it's a time where he could expect a lot of separations in his life.
Well, and I wonder, assuming he's an alcoholic, I wonder if he will decide to seclude himself in rehab too,
That
to work up some stuff, because I just keep feeling like he was abused, and I don't know if I mean, we can tell in his birth chart about trauma or this progressed one if he has trauma.
oh,
Um,
looking at yeah, anybody's chart when you're thinking trauma, uh,
yeah,
a good place to look is the moon. So the inner
yeah,
ring is his birth chart here. So a good place to look at is the moon. Is the moon being messed with by some other planets? And Neptune kind of counts as that, uh,
yeah,
because it's an outer planet, and the outer planets, they're hugely powerful, and they don't care about us. Ultimately, the 7 days of the week planets, they're here to help. And these planets are just huge. And so the moon says so much about your experience with your mother. And so this altered consciousness part would be added to the mother experience. And so looking at this, you would also take from it maybe that his mother would have also struggled with substances. I don't know if that's public or if that's true, but that would
oh,
be his experience, that mom is Neptune like.
yeah,
And that unreliability in a
yeah,
mother figure would be a kind of trauma. And then he also has uh Pluto down here in his natal chart. Wherever Pluto is usually marks out trauma. And
okay,
And so that's usually another good place to look. The third house is about siblings and sort of like the brain, what's close at hand kind of thing. And he's got a Saturn Jupiter conjunction there, plus Pluto, plus the lot of fortune, which is this little guy. We haven't talked too much about him. And these are just a lot of heavy hitter planets all in one area. This is probably an intense childhood that
Yeah.
which of course we know that he did have an intense childhood. It sounds like everyone who was, worked in those circles as a child star. And also very noticeable with a Leo rising, certain parts of your experience are kind of baked in. A Leo rising is always going to have Scorpio in the fourth house. And so that has Mars ruling the home and
Yeah.
home environment and the home experience, which is not desirable.
Yeah, it's not very nurturing, right? It's not
No, this would be just sort of out of the box. This would be a family with issues.
yeah.
And certainly he would experience it that way. And then also the Saturn ruled signs are whatever is most difficult for us. And so for a Leo rising, that's sixth house, daily life, and relationship. And so none of these things help him. I think he could probably do what we're doing now with that Moon Neptune conjunction. Like that's something that could really be used for psychic work or for creativity. But we haven't seen much that's uh good helping him yet, which is sad to
No.
see. The Venus you pointed out, I think is probably some good, more positive news because she is the lesser benefic. So what she brings in is just good. It just makes things better. It makes things more palatable. It makes things easier. And Venus is exalted in Pisces. So this is a strong Venus and
Yeah.
therefore a weaker Mars. And the sun is in Pisces is not super strong. But so this Venus is really kind of helping this bad situation and will help it over the next few years. But I would say this is a midlife crisis right here.
Yeah.
And then look what it's squaring. The red line would be a square. It's squaring this whole pile up here is squaring his moon Neptune. And so the midlife crisis that we see here that might uh, include a new woman because Venus is coming through,
Yeah.
that could represent his current relationship rekindling too. But it certainly suggests a female influence coming through. But you can see these situations are aggravating each other essentially.
Yeah.
And this is his long term. And so this is someone that generally relationships are hard. And right now there may be a new person involved, but the whatever substance use is both of the it's a problem. The substance use is a problem because of that square, and it's a square from Mars, which this is sudden events. Even though this is the progress chart, this is when you'd have sudden events with Mars squares.
Yeah, when you're reading this chart right now, are you picking up his energy?
Uh, it feels
Because
like his story is definitely coming through and what's going on with him right now. What do you get
because
about him energy wise?
I'm feeling so drained and like um heartbreak. Like just like it's like it feels, you know how like after you have a good cry, then you kind of feel like a little better, but you're still raw.
Mm,
That's kind of what it feels like to me.
yeah, I think this is highly emotional for him, highly
Yeah.
emotional time. that has probably been kind of coming for a long time too.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that they don't live in California. They have two homes. I think Tennessee and somewhere else. And I think and they've lived outside of LA for a long time and probably trying to get away from that, maybe that toxic lifestyle.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder
Yeah,
if that ever works.
yeah, I don't know.
One thing that I think is oh, before we move on with his transits, uh his progressed moon with the progressed chart, you always want to look at the moon because that's the one that really changes a lot in a progressed chart. So one aspect of his birth chart we didn't touch on, the old negative or more negative karma is here in the seventh house with the south node, but that means the north node is in the first house, which is as negative or old karma as the south node is, the north node is hugely positive. And having the north node in the first house, sort of like being born with a good luck charm or something like that. It gives that person a little bit of magic, particularly uh I think of him, he was part of one of the boy bands, was insane.
Yeah, and in sync, yeah.
But he was the one that kind of, even though that was a group, he kind of emerged as the star of that band. And
Right.
and that's what he's kind of known for. And so there's this north node in the first house would give somebody like that extra whatever it is that made him stand out from the other guys,
Right.
or like a destiny around showbiz type stuff. And so the north node is still here in the progressed chart, which we expect, but the progressed moon is here and passing over it. And so this is also it kind of, hi Maddie.
Hi.
We're talking about Justin Timberlake.
Yes.
Astrology gets me talking about things that I might not talk about otherwise. So we were just talking about how this moon is crossing this point in his chart right now, and how he has some of that star power. I don't think he has the full dose of it,
Hmm.
in the way that I don't think you'd put him at the top tier of entertainers, but maybe second tier.
Mhm.
And I think that star power is really activated for him right now because of wherever the moon is, that's where things are really manifesting. Like, remember those diagrams we looked at of the tree of life, or like all the nested spheres, all the energy, the idea is it comes down from the heavens and it manifests through the moon. And that's very true in that the moon is our feelings, and our feelings are most of our experience, and the really kind of important part of our experience. And so his charisma, and I mean, probably other people think he's way more charismatic than I do, but his charisma is something that if he were here getting a reading from us, I would say, you have this long-term midlife crisis playing out here, but your charisma as a star and as a performer is not over because of the moon transiting this point in his first house right now, his progressed moon.
Could that also mean to, like, with the moon in his first house, that he's going to be getting more in touch with his feelings,
Yeah,
whereas maybe they were blocked
definitely.
before by the Neptune?
Yeah, we thought maybe the Venus and Pisces progression represents maybe a new long-term relationship, but the moon transiting his first house suggests sort of like he might be alone too,
Mhm.
or there's a more inward focus there.
Yeah.
So we'll look at transits for him. And so this is oh wow. There's a lot more aspects, but this is often the way it looks. So this on the inner ring is his birth chart, and on the outer ring are the planets on the day that he was arrested.
Mm.
And so, yeah, what do we notice? What are we looking for? I would probably say, because we were talking about Neptune and substance use, we'd be
Mm.
looking at Neptune. We'd be looking at Mars. What's going on with those planets?
Yeah, and Saturn. Well, I'm just looking at like the eighth house, right? Was
Oh,
that
he's got Saturn transiting his eighth house.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be a lot that would be a time of I would say great stress or pressure on one's mental health when Saturn's
Yeah.
making that transit. And so that's added pressure on him right now.
Right, but so do you mean like there was something that he is feeling pressure about? 'Cause I mean I think he's making a new movie or something. So I don't know if that's the pressure. But
Oh yeah, he
obviously
acts too, doesn't he?
something is leading him to drink too much and make poor choices. So
Yeah.
which also then feeds again the more pressure and that kind of thing that he doesn't probably want to feel.
The pressure is really from within.
Yeah. Okay.
The eighth house is our issues. That's our
Okay.
hangups. It's everything that's insecure about us, including the eighth house traditionally rules death,
Mm.
and having Saturn, which is associated with death, go through the eighth house, you could associate that with an encounter of mortality or the fear of mortality. And so that might be one of the themes that's bothering him.
You mean that led that before he got arrested or after?
Yeah, that's going on for him
Yeah.
in general.
Okay.
Mm.
Wow. Well, which I mean, that could be one of the reasons why he might be having a midlife crisis, right? Is like he's 45,
Yeah.
I mean, for his field, he's probably like thinks he's old.
Mm.
Yeah, you can't dance like that forever unless you're Mick Jagger. So yeah, that's definitely something to notice. And wherever Saturn is in a chart is always the hardest part. And
Mm.
and the fact that Neptune is there too is interesting. And these planets they're 10 degrees apart. They're kind of conjunct each other. Saturn moves faster, really slowly, but faster. And so that theme again around substance use, because that's what Neptune would be. And so Neptune has been going through his eighth house. So this may be confusion about his own mental health too, and certainly the substance use aspect is in there too. The other thing that I think is worth looking for is what is Mars doing? Because we talked about, this is sort of like what we're here looking for is Neptune and Mars, really. Neptune because of the substance use, and Mars because of the sudden aspect of this, as sudden events, sudden bad events. And so if we look at where Mars is transiting right now, it's transiting his career house,
Yeah.
his 10th house. And so, wherever Mars is kind of the second suckiest place in your chart at any given time. And so we already talked about the most sucky place, which is the Saturn thing for him. But to have Mars going through your house of career, that could be, because Mars is separation, that could be loss of a high profile job or damage to your reputation. And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No. So go ahead, Anna.
And he's already got Chiron there, which is another good signifier of trauma. And this is all very close to his midheaven. So that's interesting. But this Mars there's no lines attached to it. It's not really aspecting anything. But if you look at his natal Mars,
Right.
it's in an exact square
Yeah.
Uranus. And Mars Uranus squares, they suck because we know Mars is separation. We know Mars is generally experienced as unpleasant. And Saturn is slow, Mars is fast. So it's sudden things happening to you with Mars. And Uranus is that breaking barriers energy. It's always breaking barriers. And so when Mars and Uranus get in square with each other, that's when bad sudden things happen. That really manifests in outer events in a way that other aspects just don't. And so that he has this going on right now is I think uncanny. His chart is really talking about these events, I feel, in different ways. So that Uranus is almost exactly conjunct with his midheaven. So we can also, so midheaven is career. He's having something sudden happen to his career.
Right.
And it's made worse by separations within his relationship. And so,
Yeah. You know what? Maybe what we don't hear is that he and Jessica Biel are not doing well. And so he's been whatever because of his drinking and then he went on a real bender because the article said that he was drinking out of other people's drinks when they weren't at the bar, when they were like left to go to the bathroom.
oh wow, oh geez.
Like,
Yeah, that
you know what I
suggests
mean?
something's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, this has got to be tied up in relationship type stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely. This aspect of Uranus transiting midheaven, Trump is going to have that on inauguration day. The same aspect, the same transit. And so it suggests really unexpected things happening in the course of one's career. And with Uranus, it's very much a wild card. You don't know what you're going to get. The outer planets really are they're all low-key malefics in that it's very sudden events that you don't expect like this. And so when you've got a Mars Uranus square, sudden things happen. Do either of you guys have any other thoughts or questions about this?
No.
Yeah, I think the chart aspect of this, the way it plays out in his chart, you can see that it's a major event in his life. And because Pluto's now in Aquarius and will be in Aquarius for, I don't know, I'd really have to look that up, but another 20 years. Pluto's generational, so another 15 or 20 years. And so his whole relationship life is going to transform over the next 20 years. And that's another source of pressure. But yeah, that's that Uranus at midheaven is a very interesting thing. I read recently that someone does drunk driving an average of 80 times before they tend to get caught. And so this would seem very sudden to him. This is a very Uranian event for him.
Well, and the other thing, I am actually surprised they arrested him because he's famous. I don't know. I guess I was just expecting them to not do that.
Oh, I read that the police officer didn't know who he was.
Yeah, he
Oh
was
my
like a
God.
young kid. He didn't even know who he was.
He was too young to know Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I guess like Justin said like, oh, this is gonna mess up the tour. And the kid was like,
Oh
what
yeah.
tour?
Right.
Oh, that's funny. My favorite one is when Bob Dylan got arrested for trespassing because he was driving around like in New Jersey or something in some kind of rich neighborhood. He thought maybe I'll live here. I'll go peek in the windows of these houses they're building or whatever.
Mhm.
And they thought he was a vagrant. The police didn't understand who Bob Dylan was.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, he kind of looks like one.
He does. And so they thought he had no reason to be there.
That's funny.
So it will be interesting for him. This looks like a big career moment for him. That he could definitely, because of that moon progressing his first house, he could turn this around career wise
Hmm.
and have some sort of comeback sort of because of this.
Interesting.
But you can see, like, just kind of looking at this chart a little bit further, that same Uranus, it's squaring his Mars and it's also squaring his ascendant. And so this is a sudden thing that kind of, do we think it's a good thing or a bad thing? A sudden thing. The nature of these aspects will kind of tell us that. And we've got two squares and one trine. And one of them is a Mars square, which is something to be feared. I can't believe I'm saying that. Putting it that way. There's a better way to put it, but Mars square is something, it manifests in unpleasant outer events, especially Mars Uranus square. But there's also this trine with that Venus, his Venus. And so this may have this may help his public image. This may help his love life because of that Venus. But it reads like something that's hard for him. So do either of you guys have any further thoughts or questions?
I don't think so.
No, but I mean, maybe next time we can do Jessica Biel's chart.
Oh, that
See
would
how
be
she's
interesting.
reacting. Yeah.
That would be very interesting. I think we could do a mini version of that right now. We just need her chart and the transits. Let's see if she has a chart, but she probably does. She does. She's from Minnesota.
Hmm.
We can at least kind of get a read on who she is. And that will even kind of tell us something about them as a couple because he's so partnership oriented and we know that about him. And so it will be interesting to see whether that's important to her or if he would be the one to maybe carry a burden in that. She's a Pisces.
Hmm.
March 3rd, 1982. Oh, you know what? Yeah, we'll just look at her plain old chart first. Okay. One more second. Okay, everybody can see Jessica Biel?
Yeah.
Okay. So it looks like where we always start here with the first house.
Mhm.
And whatever planets are in the first house. So it's interesting to note she's got Neptune in the first house. And so this tells us because we already looked at his chart, and the language of astrology transfers from chart to chart, if that makes sense. His moon conjoins Neptune. And so Neptune is what feels like safe, what feels like home to him, and also what is intoxicating. And here's a woman that he's married to, right? Who in some ways embodies Neptune because she has Neptune in the first house.
Mm.
So this is a huge sign of compatibility, because the way that we look at these charts, we're really honing in on the most important things first. And we didn't, all of these could have been talking about his career or his children if he has them, or whatever. But all of these charts went right to the point and told us this stuff right off the bat. And now her chart kind of speaks to us and it can be in the same language because she is the embodiment of Neptune. And she's also the embodiment of Uranus, which I think is interesting because she's got Uranus right on the ascendant. And so any planet that's on the ascendant, you it is that's the way you see the world. I would expect her to be a bigger weirdo because of having Uranus on the ascendant, because Uranus makes things weird. But this is someone who somehow has that Uranian energy deeply ingrained in her. It's in there somewhere. And I don't know that much about her, but she doesn't seem like kooky Aquarian to me. But when you have Uranus on the ascendant, it's sort of like being an Aquarian. So there's interesting depths to her here that come up right away. So the next thing we'd look at to kind of try to understand her, Uranus and Neptune are her sort of co-rulers, but her ruler is Jupiter because Sagittarius is rising. And so we look at where Jupiter is, and he's retrograde in Scorpio in the 12th house. And so this is one similarity I would see between their charts, and this isn't how I think of them because they're rich, famous celebrities, but both of them experience life as hard. It comes out in the chart right away. In his chart, it talked about how he lives for relationships, but the relationships are hard and full of a lot of distressing old karmic lessons, And we hear from her chart right away that she's ruled by Jupiter. She's here to expand. But where is Jupiter? He's in the 12th house, which is sort of that's seen as kind of an inaccessible or lost place. And he's in Scorpio, which can be a tough sign. And so this could be someone who's here to expand, here to grow, but they may not know how to do that. That's emotional because it's Scorpio, and it may be very unconscious because it's 12th house. So she is definitely someone who has her own story. Another thing to notice, and probably like the next, like she's got her own issues and they're represented by this, if that makes sense, by this Jupiter. the next thing that I would kind of look for in any chart, sort of going by what we do, is our kind of order of operations, is the next thing would be, is this a day or night chart? And this is a night chart because the sun's down here. And so the most important planet after the ruler is the moon. And look where her moon is. So this is someone for whom relationships are important too. They come after all this other stuff that we just talked about, but they're important. And they're her source of security, because the moon is always our source of security. And this is also probably, she is probably someone who really needs to talk a lot, because this moon is in Gemini. And Gemini is associated with chatter, it's associated with communication. And wherever the moon is, that's what we need. And so this is someone who needs to talk to her partner. It's her lifeblood. And doing that, or not doing that, but something about it, because she's got, this moon is exactly opposing Black Moon Lilith in her first house. And I don't think we've talked too much about Black Moon Lilith. We're a little bit out of time, but I'll get back to it. It's something that tends to make things a little bit tougher. It's sort of, wherever you see Black Moon Lilith, that's where someone is usually the wildest. Like that's where they can really go crazy. And she's got that in her first house. So you could, along with that Uranus, see that as, this is someone who might do wild and crazy things. That's sort of part of their persona, which I don't know if that's true for her or not. But I would assume that there's some kind of boundary breaking, rule breaking side to her, because of the Black Moon Lilith and the Uranus. So, but Man of the Woods style Justin Timberlake is probably not talking, right? And his kind of solitary focus. And so her really needing to communicate is, it's a gift, and it's part of a grand grind for her, but that may be the crux of the whole, of any relationship issues that she would have.
Right.
So I should wrap up,
Interesting.
but do you guys have any questions before we go?
I don't think so.
No.
This is interesting.
All right, maybe we'll play with tarot cards again next week.
Oh yeah. Okay.
All right, I'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Okay.